It is the most wonderful time of the year. And no, Andy Williams fans, I'm not referring to Christmas. Just look outside. It's beautiful. State testing is over. Month of May is right around the corner. And you know what that means, teachers? Summer is right at our doorstep. And we can taste it, we can smell it, and whereas probably before spring break you were about ready to bite someone's head off, now you have a little bit more extra pep in your step. And as joyous of a time as it is for this time of the year, can also be some of the most nerve-wracking. Because not only do you know the school year's over, so do your kids. So in this episode of the Fireside Chats vlog, I'm going to look at ways that we can create less stress for the last weeks and month of school and make it really count, make things matter not only for you, but for your students as well. I'm going to divide it up into 3 parts: how I approach the year, why I approach it that way, and finally I'll get to some practical things. What did I actually do in those final weeks and month of the school year? All right, so let's get started. So let's talk about the how. How did I approach the last month and final weeks of the school year? And this is more of a philosophical approach. Regardless if you play baseball, softball, kickball, when you make contact with the ball, you know you're coached to run to first base and run through the bag, run as fast as you can. And if you didn't, you were likely going to get chewed out. And that's how I like to approach the end of the school year, because when you do that, just like in kickball, if you get a good enough hit, you're going to be able to round first base and carry all that momentum with you to second base and possibly third base. And you're able to get a lot out of that run just simply because you started and gave great effort running toward first base. Well, that's the same in the school year. Think about that. If we can tap into that kind of momentum, and I'm a big believer, if you finish strong, you're likely going to start strong the next school year. And that's what we all want to do. We want to end on a positive note. We want our kids to end up on a positive note. And as you know, if you end the year crabby, you're going to remember that likely when you start the next year. So will the kids. So I always try to preach that in the classroom as the final days are approaching, that we're just going to keep going. We're not going to stop. And also, that allows us to teach a very valuable life lesson. Listen, just because things come to an end does not give us the right to slack off. Just because the year's coming to an end doesn't mean that we have the right to slack off. And it doesn't matter if we're teaching, if we're learning, we're transitioning to a job or a different season of our life when we know the end is coming. It's not okay just to know that, oh, well, I'm not going to be here, or that's not going to, this is going to come to an end in the next month, so why does it matter? What great life skills to teach kids that it does matter, because you know as well as I do, when things come to an end and you see these kids, these adults that persevere through all of that and still give 110%, those kids get noticed later on in life. And what a great work habit and life skill to teach our kids. So that's how I approached the end of the year. All right, so now it's time to get a little bit heavy on you, because we've got to talk about my reasoning of why I did what I did. And I can always tell you that I always ran toward first base when I first started teaching. And I don't know about you, but I'm a person that tries to live through conviction. I just know that we all have a moral compass. We all know when that moral compass goes off and we know something's not right, and we all have an opportunity to do something about it. And while always we act on those things, they're not always the popular choice. But at the end of the day, when I knew it was about my kids and I did things to make their lives better, it ultimately made me better, and then I could rest my head on the pillow at night knowing I've done everything I could do. So here's the question I have for you. Why should our classrooms look any different after the testing's over? Why should they look any different? Because to me, if I'm willing to take risk after the test is over, why am I not willing to take risk before? And that's something that I really, really felt convicted about early, very, very early in my career. And when our classrooms look drastically different, and there are exceptions, yes, I understand, but for the most part, when our classes and the way we teach is drastically different after the testing is already over, what message are we sending to our students? And I don't think we really think about that totally when we choose to do something or not do something. But to me, What it says is that it was all about the test, that that's all that matters when our classrooms are drastically different. Yes, I know there are exceptions to the rule. Maybe you just had a stroke of genius and you realize it's time to change some things and you make the change after the test. I totally understand that. But if we're not willing to do things, or if we're willing to do things rather after the test, would you consider trying those things before the test? Because when we do that, what we're saying is we're letting the test make the decisions for us. And that's why I run toward first base as fast as I can. All right, now that I kind of laid it heavy on you about the why, let's talk about the actual things I did in my classroom, some of the practical things that I can do and you can do to help make the end of the year successful and meaningful for you and your students. So there are two things that I did primarily, and the first one kind of piggybacks off the last thing. And as I progressed in my career, I learned to take risks before the test, but even at that, there's calculated risks that you have to take. We all understand that. And as the year comes along, there's always great things that you accumulate and want to try, but the timing's not right. Or even as a professional where you weren't ready to do that in September and October, but now the month of May rolls around and you're a better educator and you can do those things now. This is the time to do that. I call it the R&D, the research and development. Just test, test, test. And I'm not referring to formative and summative. Like I said, you've got those things in the back of your mind. I had a list of things that I always wanted to try, and here is the time to try it. Just as a pure scientist, the only way you get valid test results is to test these things in their authentic environment. And what better way to do that? Now, are your kids guinea pigs? Well, sure, but that's okay because it's okay to tell them and teach them that you're willing to go out there and take risk and try new things, and the fails will be epic, and that's okay, to teach them that failure is part of the process. So maybe it's technology that you want to integrate even more. Or maybe you're wanting just to start that phase. You know that you've had these devices and you want to really up your game. Or you're already doing some things, and based off the year and the PD that you've either gotten or gone out on your own and learned about, to incorporate some of those into your classroom. But let's just take technology just aside. Why not try new teaching methods? Maybe there is a approach that you want to look to do, but you didn't really know whether or not it was going to work. And now I say it's the time to do it, because you will be able to start the next school year with all of this data and valuable resources and things that you know work, so you can start the year off and you don't have to wait 3/4 of the next year to be able to try something like this. So just test, test, test. And please understand, I'm not trying to be contradictory to myself, what I just said a minute ago about not taking risks. But if you're already taking risks, go ahead and start taking bigger risks. It's okay to do that, okay? It's okay to teach your kids through that process. It's a wonderful life learning experience, and that was the first thing that I did. Number two, and it's something maybe you're already doing, and I hope that you are, but if you're not, would you consider doing this? Vertical alignment. But no better way to team build and to have that educational leadership I talked about in another video, being humble and being a servant, to go next door. And this is what I did. When I taught 7th grade, you go next door to the 8th grade teachers and say, what are the 3 to 4 things your kids need to be able to know and understand to be successful in your classroom next year? And I promise you, they'll be able to tell you. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily rattling off standards that they need to know, because sometimes, especially when I taught math and in the math world, just because the standards are there, there's skills that you've got to be able to really harness and master to be able to accomplish the next grade level's worth of standards. So maybe they're not included in the standards, and those are the things that you focus on. Now, I didn't ask for 10 and I didn't ask for 20. I asked for 3 to 4. And typically I would ask this well before we would get into test prep mode, TCAP tests, and in the state of Tennessee as we do, or T and ready. So I did this before the state testing because I needed to have that game plan. And usually those 3 to 4 things carried me into the very last portion of the year, because you all know there are distractions at the end of the year, whether we like it or not. It's just going to happen. It happens toward the end of every year. Field trips, assemblies, change of schedule, that sort of stuff. So, and the reason I didn't ask for 10 to 20 is because I don't have time to teach that. And if I did, it would just be skimming the surface. And what point is that? So, what better way to tell somebody you matter, especially the next grade level? Because when you go to that teacher and you ask, what are the 3 to 4 things? Here's what you're really saying. You're really telling them, I value you. I want these kids to succeed for you. I want you to succeed, and I'm willing to help you out. And what great team building and cohesiveness you could have among your department levels and grade levels if you did that. So if you're not already doing vertical alignment, it's something you ought to try. Now, when I was in 8th grade, the next grade level was high school. So what did I do? It's a simple email, and we live in the world of Google Hangouts where you could simply call somebody, and literally 5 minutes of your time is going to mean the world of difference for you and your students. And typically all of those plans took me up to the end of the year. So those were the practical things that I did to get myself to the end of the year, and it never failed. I always had really good endings to the year. I think, and believe it or not, your kids will appreciate you more for just teaching and keep going. Even when it's sometimes easy to want to stop and slow down, just keep running through first base. So with another Fireside Chats vlog, I thank you for watching up to this point, and as always, I'll see you next time.